chug, 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 chug. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wizard Staff. I'm your host, Blake.
And I'm Guy.
And we are two drunk novices who like to talk about EDH. We do drink and swear, so you have been warned. Please drink responsibly when you're playing children's card games. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Superfriends 101, the very basics.
Ooh. And to join us tonight, we have my super friend, Jesse, returning from when we had him on from Theros Beyond Death. Jesse, say hello.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back with my two good friends.
Aww. And so,
I'm
I'm
your
glad
friend
that you
too?
think of it.
I'm so
Yeah, Blake.
I love it. I'm loved.
Alright, so we brought Jesse on tonight because he is probably...
The most qualified.
Yep, the most qualified out of all of us, because he has a Super Friends deck, and he is very knowledgeable on the subject. Much more smarter than us. That English didn't really work out too well.
Yeah.
But Super Friends, what is that? What Super Friends? What are we talking about? Jesse, what is a Super Friends deck?
It's a very good question, Guy. Thank you. Allow me to inform your
Enlighten us,
viewers.
senpai.
Well, a Super Friends deck refers to Planeswalkers mostly. You're using a lot of Planeswalkers to accrue value into your deck, and it essentially creates an engine for you to be able to outvalue your opponents.
What's a Planeswalker?
Planeswalker? What is going on? All these fancy words, you know, I don't know what they mean.
Oh,
What's
geez,
a Planeswalker?
Elaborate this too.
If you want to.
Well, you know, a Planeswalker, to me, they're like just one of the main characters of Magic, usually. They usually are like in the promo art, they usually have their big storylines, and they're like really weird permanents that have different ranges of an ability, and they're usually pretty unique with their ultimate, which is usually their last ability, which is probably never going to happen, but it's that flavor. It's the flavor that you're going
It's the fact that it could happen, right?
It's
the
threat. It's the threat.
Play some mind games.
So, interesting fact, but, I mean, you are a Planeswalker as you're playing the game. The game is centered around you being a Planeswalker, going around and doing magical duels with other Planeswalkers. And so, the Planeswalkers that we're referring to in the Super Friends deck archetype is like the extra characters that we see kind of come up in the stories often. And they are people, not always just human, but people who can travel between the inner dimensions of the Magic the Gathering lore. So they are able to transport themselves from like Dominaria to Innistrad, or from like Kaladesh to Ixalan, just to name a few examples. So, before we get any further,
yeah,
what are we drinking tonight?
Well, so you suggested, well, also maybe we should just get this out of the way. Coronavirus will not be affecting the Wizard Staff podcast that much. We are bi-week. We put out stuff once every 2 weeks on the average. We are like both Guy and I live in separate locations, but and they are pretty active in Washington State and California, but it'll be fine.
So we practice social distancing all the time.
Oh yeah.
We keep our distance all the time. So it won't slow us down, but I'm drinking a Corona just because I thought it fit with the theme, but yeah. Blake, what are you drinking?
Well, I tried to get Corona as well, but it was actually sold out at the store. And I'm like, I don't really want to go to another store, A, because I'm lazy, and B, like I'm encouraged not to. So I decided to just get a wine instead. And this wine is, I'm always going to butcher it every single time. Imolo Napa Valley. It is a Sauvignon Blanc from 2017. And it's from Fairfield, California. And it's pretty tasty. I actually like this. I am definitely a white wine kind of guy.
All right. And Jesse, are you drinking anything now? Or
I'll
are
never
you...
drink anything.
Never?
Probably not.
Not even water?
I don't partake in this sin.
Oh, right. You're a good Christian boy, right?
Exactly. I gotta keep up appearances.
Just drinking some juice instead.
Nothing at the moment.
Gosh, you're just drinking air. All right, that's fine.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So we've talked about what is a Super Friends deck, what is a Planeswalker. To give a little history about the Planeswalkers for all you Forthos out there, but Planeswalkers were first introduced in the Lorwyn block. We had 5 originally, 1 for each color. We had Jace for blue, Ajani for white, Chandra for red, Liliana for black, and Garrick for green. So, since Dominaria, the most recent Dominaria set, they have all been eroded to become legendary permanents, which is important because that also refers to historic. But so, all Planeswalkers enter the battlefield with a number of loyalty counters that determine what a Planeswalker can do. So most have 3 abilities that determine whether you use or add loyalty counters. Typically, a Planeswalker has an ultimate, which is the move that requires the most loyalty for them to use. So it's not an ability you can use right away. You have to kind of work towards it. And typically, this ultimate is like the most powerful move that they can do, and it could be sometimes game ending depending on the format. Now, Planeswalkers haven't always been the most relevant to EDH, but since War of the Spark, the set that came out last year, they introduced 36 new Planeswalkers at various rarities and introduced them with static abilities. This allowed them to have a stronger board presence than just being able to only use one ability at a time.
Sorry, there's a car going off. There we go. Yeah, like War of the Spark really like just changed the landscape of EDH Planeswalkers. They like actually made good ones, like because everyone who's like been listening to me a long time just knows that like I'm just like the biggest hater on Planeswalkers in EDH. And so it's nice that we got like some relevant ones in that set. I'm just gonna say that static abilities are pretty good. I hear they're basically killable enchantments. I love those. Like yeah, I love them.
Do either of you have a favorite Planeswalker? You would say either from War of the Spark or anywhere in general.
I will go first. I just want to say Narset Parter of Veils is my favorite Planeswalker because if you haven't noticed, like EDH players are sluts for drawing cards. They are just like, oh, I'm just gonna draw all these cards in one turn. Oh, I'm gonna have to discard down. Such a hard choice. And I'm just like, I don't want to deal with you. Just like, no. I'm just gonna be like, no, you can't draw more than one card each turn. No. Let's pump the brakes on that. Yeah.
Jesse, what about you?
I mean, in all my times of playing this Planeswalker deck, the one that surprised me the most is Angrath, the Flame Chained. Just like constantly making people discard a card and burning them for 2 life, like, oh, it does actually a lot of work. So I would say that one was like the biggest surprise. It's definitely turned out to be like my favorite to get.
Sorry, Blake and I both are completely unaware of this
Oh,
card, so we have to look it up.
Yeah, I'm looking it up.
Oh.
It's Angrath the Flame Chained. It is 3 and a black and a red for 4 loyalty. +1, each opponent discards a card and loses 2 life. That's annoying. Just repeatable discard is pretty annoying, I hear. Just people complaining about Kroxa already. So I know that's pretty annoying.
Yeah, but in terms of like super strong cards, Narset and the new Ashiok, or I guess the old new Ashiok, or the Spark Ashiok.
Old new
That
Ashiok.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, that Ashiok turned out to be pretty good too.
Alright, cool. Personally, yeah, I think I would agree with Blake. The Narset and the Nissa, the newest Nissa, Who Shakes the World. Those two would probably be my favorite. Or it would be the Sorin the Mad, I think. The one that doesn't have a plus ability. It's Sarkon the Mad, sorry. He doesn't have a plus ability. He has a minus ability that just allows him to ultimate real quick, and it's really flavorful in a dragon deck. And it was the first Planeswalker card that I owned, so it felt really cool. So, okay. So we've talked about Planeswalkers and what they can do, and sometimes that they have these ultimates, which are like game-ending abilities.
That's the idea.
Yeah, and they can create these things called emblems.
Yeah.
What's an emblem, Blake?
So an emblem is Planeswalkers are the only permanent that I'm aware of that can make an emblem, and they are often they're just so there's like a lot of rules things I could get into the nitty-gritty, but basically they're like, think of them as permanent, like, gosh, how do I describe this? They're basically like enchantments in the command zone that are completely uninteractable. The only way you can get rid of an emblem is to either A, kill the player that made the emblem, or B, cast Karn Liberated and restart the game. Both
Karn Liberated being a very good Planeswalker.
Planeswalker, yeah. It's, like one of the most original Planeswalkers. But yeah, both of those are like pretty much the only two circumstances you can get rid of emblems. Pretty limited. And for all of those who feel my pain about how emblems are uninteractable, I personally have made peace with, I want to know all of your guys' thoughts. I've made peace with the fact that emblems are pretty much uninteractable. Like, Morrow has gone on record saying that there's no current plan, like, quote, our current plan is to not use spells to remove them. So basically they don't have any plans to like make a spell that says get rid of an emblem. Like, I've just kind of made peace with it.
It's interesting that that's kind of the plan, because Morrow's also often talked about how interaction is one of the 10 key things of what makes a game great, but he's limiting his interactions with this one card type. Like, is it even like, I guess it's not technically a card type, but
it's not even technically a permanent. You can't even.
Right. It's just, yeah. So I guess it's just
an object in like the command zone or something. I don't know.
Right.
No, that's not true. I don't know. It's on the player.
In your experiences, do you think that there should be any ways that we should be able to interact with emblems, or should they be something that? This is a question for both of you, but
to be my own devil's advocate, it's also kind of like sometimes the game just needs to like fucking end. Like, usually the emblems are pretty powerful, and like, all right, if you got the emblem, they're uninteractable. You're probably gonna use it to win, if not that turn, the next few turns. That's the idea. So, and also it's like in EDH, like, you're never getting an emblem because you're not playing those sorts of cards. Like, the only time emblems are showing up are like mid-tier to casual EDH games, which should in theory be fine with it. So I've made my peace with it. It's fine.
Okay.
As long
Jesse,
as long as there's not like in the next 5 to 10 years like some other sort of thing that's completely uninteractable. I want emblems to be kind of like, okay, besides for maybe eminence. Like, I don't want there to be a whole bunch of things that you can't interact with at all.
right. Jesse, what do you think?
It's kind of a complicated topic because the emblems are supposed to be the payoff for playing the Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not really very... Planeswalkers themselves are threats because they're kind of like ticking time bombs, and it's kind of the reason why you need to get rid of them. Usually their pluses and minuses aren't gonna really win you the game. They're gonna get you value for sure and maybe put you ahead, but they're not winning you anything.
That's totally
But I
true.
also think that if you design a card to remove emblems specifically, it would just be a bad card.
Yeah.
When would you run this card? Like,
Yeah.
it's way too specific. And a lot of planeswalkers with their ults aren't even emblems a lot of the time. So it doesn't even necessarily deal with kind of the planeswalker issue, just only emblems. So it's really hard. I think the only way to do it is you have to essentially make emblems permanents and maybe give them like indestructible or something. I don't know.
Do you think it would be... I totally see your point. I think that is a very good call out because it's almost like you would have to run it in a deck knowing that you're going to be up against Superfriends. Like, it's going to be something that's not going to be a dead card in your hand in any meta. It's more like tech that you would like slot in. So maybe it's something that they could experiment with at some point, maybe, I don't know, where it's like target player sacrifices Planeswalker or emblem that they have, where it has to kind of, it can't just be its own thing. It would need to kind of like go along with something, but then who knows, because that's still kind of a little specific, but that is a good point.
I am going to add to this really quickly. I promise, folks, we'll move on to the next topic really soon. The only thing I want to add to this is, Jesse, I don't really want there to like become cards that only say like get rid of a emblem, because that basically reminds me of a situation with poison counters and a card called leeches, and leeches only exists to get rid of poison counters and nothing else. And it's like such a weird niche card, and yeah, it exists, but like no one ever plays it, and it exists in a very weird space.
It would probably make more sense to have the card be in standard, because if they had made that card for War of the Spark and, there were a lot more Planeswalkers doing ultimates, maybe they would have come up with some way to interact with the emblems, but that's not what they did. So I
mean, even in standard, emblems, they aren't really
a thing.
There was only like maybe that one Gideon that would just be able to make an emblem as soon as it was played, and that one was really strong. But like even Chandra,
Awakened Inferno,
like hasn't found a home pretty much anywhere, and it's decent, but I don't know. I mean, emblems really aren't the problem. It's not being able to deal with Planeswalkers or comboing Planeswalkers to getting ultimates immediately is more the issue than like the emblems per se. But in no other format are Planeswalkers like really, the emblems aren't really the problem. It's not being able to interact with the Planeswalkers themselves that make them problems.
Yeah, that's the idea, is like you should be able to kill in most situations, you should be able to interact with the Planeswalker before they make the emblem.
Exactly.
That's the theory. Yeah. We'll also give a really quick example of what we're talking about instead of talking abstractly. So one example would be Tamiyo, Field Researcher. For 1 and green, white, blue, you get 4 loyalty, and then there's some other activated abilities we don't really care about. And then the -7 is draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with, you may cast non-land cards from your hand without paying their mana costs. So that's yeah, it's basically omniscience, but it's even better because it has an emblem. You can't even people tilt at omniscience, and you can't even interact with this. And you get to draw 3 cards.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I hear it's pretty good. All right, we're gonna move on now to give a bit more context to this whole subject, which is at the time of recording, what are the 5 most popular commanders to build a Super Friends deck?
So if you want to build one, like, who do you think it might be the best to like helm your deck?
So to nobody's surprise, in our number 1 slot, right? That's the number. Yeah, she's the number 1. Yeah, we're just gonna start off with number 1. We're not gonna do no countdown shit or nothing. We're gonna do Atraxa's Praetor's Voice. For those who don't know and have been living under a rock, she is a green, white, blue, black for a legendary creature, Angel Horror. She's a 4/4 flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, proliferate. She's just has it all, and there's many ways to build Atraxa, but one of the ways that one of the many ways people like to build her is Super Friends, because she's in 4 of the 5 colors of Magic, and you can just proliferate, meaning your loyalty counters will be going up 1 at the end step, just value.
Right, and you can pick. It's not even like all counters. You're going to use it only for your asymmetrical side, so you're gaining the benefits, and maybe that'll put your planeswalkers at being at higher loyalties and like being able to ultimate faster than you think they would be able to, or just keep them around on the battlefield longer.
Yeah, Jesse, what do you think about this commander as a Super Friends deck? This is also like 5 times more popular than the next most popular Super Friends deck.
I think this is like the quintessential like Super Friends commander until they make one that's specifically for planeswalkers. I think it has it's pretty much everything you want. It has white for like white does have like this really niche planeswalker support with it. There was like Dijeru whose eyes are opened or whatever, and it's like
Arena
specifically
Rector.
Arena Rector. Like they have like this weird tutors like deploy the Gatewatch. So white has a lot of support. Green is some of the best support. Blue helps you proliferate. Black's for a ton of removal and recursion. It has everything it needs.
Just
and the
not
planeswalker.
Red.
Yeah. Basically.
All right. So we'll go now to the second most popular Super Friends commander.
Yeah, and I do want to say I was able to like kind of. I feel like with this one and then the next 2, there was kind of a theme where the Atraxa was focused on the proliferate mechanic, and proliferate will probably play a role in all Super Friends decks just because that is such a powerful ability. But then these next 3 all kind of had the similarities of they are all Lubert commanders, which is just great because you can have access to all those colors, and each one of these also cares about being able to cast like really big spells or legendaries, which planeswalkers are. So Sisay, Weatherlight Captain, who is a 2 white legendary creature, human soldier, 2/2. Sisay gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And then for Wooburg, search your library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than Sisay's power, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it's pretty easy for you to just be able to tutor out a planeswalker.
It sort of reminds me of Isan the Wanderer Bard, where like it's more toolboxy, and you are restricted to legendary cards that you can tutor out, but you're like kind of reacting to like what the rest of your opponents are doing, and like getting the specific legendary card that deals with other people's stuff.
Yeah, next we have Ramos Dragon Engine, which is pretty cool. I like this card a lot.
Because it's a dragon.
dragon. 6 generic mana, legendary artifact creature dragon, 4/4 with flying. Whenever you cast a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Ramos for each of that spell's colors. Remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos. Add double Wooburg, so white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, to your mana pool. Activate this ability only once each turn. So it's nice because you can ramp pretty hard and helps you just cast those higher CMC planeswalkers, which I don't think we mentioned, but most of the planeswalkers, except for some of the more recent ones, tend to have like a higher CMC of like 5 to 6.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. Like the elephant in the room is that the average CMC of a Super Friends deck is like 5 or 6.
Yeah, so high. These decks tend to play a little slower than other decks, and I mean, I think my only experience playing against them is with Jesse's, but you do want to run a lot of like ramp support to be able to get them out and, you know, be able to do stuff quicker.
Yeah, and we will get to your deck, Jesse, I promise. We just gotta wait a little bit.
It happens.
Okay.
Well, Jesse, so this next commander, Joda Archmage Eternal, who I don't think I've ever played against your Joda deck, but when you had him, was he a Planeswalker deck?
Well, it had like a couple Nicol Bolas in there, but that was about it. It wasn't a Planeswalker deck. It was more just big stuff.
Was it a Nicol Bolas tribal deck?
No.
Okay.
Fortunately not.
I would have given you shit.
Alright, so Joda Archmage Eternal, 1 blue, red, white, legendary creature, human wizard, 4/3 with flying. You may pay Wooburg rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So this is still a 5-colored deck, but like we said, you're able to kind of cheat out planeswalkers for lower costs, which is pretty good.
Yeah. So I have played against this as Super Friends deck in person, and you know, most of your planeswalkers are 5 or 6 CMC or whatever on average, and so the ideal play is to like just pay Wooburg, put out Omniscience, and then just like dump the rest of your hand of planeswalkers, like hopefully on like turn 5, and then to just be like, you got an answer to this? You probably don't. I'm going to now hopefully restock my hand using my planeswalkers and wrap board and just accrue value, and just like, this is the beginning of the end, fuckers. Yeah.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah. It hurts.
And then the 5th most talked about Planeswalker deck, which is the one that Jesse runs. Jesse, would you like to talk about him a little bit?
Well, I guess since you're putting me on the spot, I gotta do it. So it's Nicol Bolas the Ravager. It's 1 Grixis. It's a legendary Elder Dragon. He's a 4/4. On his front side, he is flying, and when he enters, each opponent has to discard a card. But since it's a flip card, it can flip over to a Planeswalker with 4 and Grixis, and you flip him over to his Planeswalker side, called Nicol Bolas the Arisen. He starts off at 7 loyalty. His +2 is to draw 2, -3 is to deal 10 to a creature or Planeswalker, -4 is essentially to reanimate either a creature or Planeswalker from any graveyard. And then his -12 is to pretty much take someone out of the game. So that's pretty much it. I had actually originally built this Planeswalker deck to play Oathbreaker. So I really wanted to play Dragon God when it first came out. But when I realized that, you know, nobody plays Oathbreaker, and that format was pretty much dead on arrival, you know, I had to, you know,
some people tried. You tried. I respect that.
And it didn't work out too well. I essentially had to retool to Commander, and this was pretty much my only option. But it ended up being not too bad. Like,
Not too bad?
Being able to get an early discard like creature out that if people try to kill again, you're gonna make them discard again by replaying it. It's kind of like a go ahead, try, but like I'll keep taking cards out of everyone's hands the more you try to remove this card. So it also works with itself in that you make everyone discard a card in the early game, so they're more incentivized to like remove a late game card from their hand early because they might not get to it that early in the game. And then now when you flip over to your Planeswalker side, your reanimation targets are really good because now they've most likely discarded something very good. So then you also have a way to protect it the turn you flip it. So it's pretty good on its own. Like a 4/4 to protect your walkers is already pretty decent since it also has flying. So the card, it's turned out to be way better than I had originally thought. I thought I would never be playing this I thought I would never be playing the creature itself, but it ended up alright.
What would you say the deck's biggest weakness is?
For purely like objective reasons.
Just for like not personal, but like what do you find to be like the hardest thing about playing the deck?
Guys writing notes on this.
I would say the hardest thing, this deck just isn't equipped to deal with combo decks. Like but the only thing that really gets past combo is like the discard part of this deck, but like Planeswalkers by themselves, I think they're just too slow to deal with any type of combo, really. They don't really they don't interact with the stack. They don't do anything to stop people from doing like some crazy combos. So that's probably the weakest part of the deck. But that's just intrinsic to like the strategy itself. My decks aren't weak, by the way. Don't even start.
So when you flip over this card into the Planeswalker mode, like you kind of alluded to earlier, you immediately -4 it to get like some big beefy creature that somebody discarded early game, right?
Essentially.
Okay, so it's like down to like 3 loyalty, and that big beefy creature is like enough to protect it. Like, what do you like have any specific stories of like the best thing you ever got from it?
I got Gisela from it, and that was that one was pretty good. That was pretty disgusting. But really, flipping the card isn't what I'm trying to do necessarily, because you have to sort of play around the fact that you don't have green to do like the pretty disgusting combos. You don't have white for the synergy, so you need to play what Grixis is good at. And Grixis is really good at making people like discard cards. Yeah. It's good at blowing up people's lands. It's good at clearing the board. It's very like mean control.
So
and the Planeswalkers are there to, when I destroy all the lands, when I have cleared the board, now I have
the hands.
Yes, I've cleared
everyone's
answers.
Hands. Even if they have answers, they can't cast them because they have no lands.
Yeah, and now I'm the one that's accruing value off of the Planeswalkers. So you have to play this mean. There's no other way around it. There's no combos that you can do. Not really. So that's pretty much how you have to play, and I love it. It feels so good.
I can just see the like pain and misery in guys' eyes right now.
It's pretty fun.
It is. It's a good deck. I won't lie.
But do I think the deck is like, this is what you should do? No. Just play just play Atraxa. If you're gonna play like a Planeswalker deck, and you want to win, just do like some Atraxa combo stuff with like doubling season. Like
No. What you do is you do Angus Mackenzie Fog Tribal.
No, I don't believe in Fog.
Oh, come on, you don't want to buy a $200 Legends card?
No, I'm okay.
No, okay.
Okay, so we talked about kind of the 5 biggest commanders for our Super Friends deck. Now, what are some of the staples to Super Friends? Now, this first one should come as no surprise to anyone. I know, it's doubling season, which already is a...
What's this card? I've never heard of it. What?
It's already a very good card. It's 4 and a green, enchantment. If an effect will create one or more tokens, blah 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 blah. That part's not as important. But if an effect would put one or more counters on a permanent you control, it puts twice that many of those counters on that permanent instead. So when your planeswalkers enter the battlefield, so let's say you have one that enters the battlefield with 5, it now enters the battlefield with 10, which most of the time is going to allow you to ult if your planeswalkers have an ult in their ability. So pretty good. So as we mentioned before, the Tamio field researcher who initially just creates a omniscience emblem, she comes down onto the battlefield. Originally she would have 4, but now she has 8, and her -7 just gets you omniscience. So
yeah,
GG.
so like she gives you omniscience, draw an uninteractable omniscience, draws you 3 cards to potentially further refill your hand, still lives at 1 loyalty, so you can still use her for her other abilities in the next few turns. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
That's just one planeswalker. Can I just like to interrupt? Like, planeswalkers are just kind of that one archetype where it's like, you know, they're not the most competitive, but like, especially in like the more super casual metas, where like these can like make a bunch of emblems and are uninteractable. It's just like, oh god, how do I stop this? It's so good.
I would say if you're not playing like competitive, planeswalkers are like just the demon of casual games, because not only is it just like this, it doesn't say like you win the game. Now you have to play through whatever other 50 planeswalkers are in this guy's deck, and you're gonna be sitting there to see how he wins. It's pretty much like you want to give up before they actually win, because it's gonna take so goddamn long.
We can
Pretty
keep
good.
continuing. Yeah, we might continue that theme, but we'll move on to the Chain Veil, which is 4 colorless and is a legendary creature, legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. 4 tap for each planeswalker you control. You may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn, as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. So it can be played. It's colorless. It's an artifact. It can be played in any deck because it's a colorless artifact. And there's definitely some decks that can abuse this, such as Teferi Temporal Archmage, which is like the only planeswalker that can be played as your commander and is like competitively viable. And then it can also be played like in Estrad the Mask, which is like fringe CEDH viable. It's like basically a combo enabler with your commander. So it's a pretty good card, and it's also just like pretty good value if you're just playing casually.
Yeah, doesn't it work with Estrad, because Estrad would create a token enchantment to put onto the Chain Veil, and then you activate Chain Veil to allow Estrad to untap something again, and then essentially you can just like tap and untap the Chain Veil quite a bunch with Estrad to create value. I don't know.
Yeah, basically like you can use the totem armor thing to like tap it and untap it, basically cast and recast your commander, milling and then playing your then milled cards to basically put your deck onto the battlefield, and then like extorting everyone out to death or do a few other things. There's lots of different options. It works. It's convoluted, but it works.
Sounds good. I wouldn't have thought that was one of the better ways to do it, but I guess if someone made it work. Next we have Evolution Sage, who is 2 and a green. Creature Elf Druid, 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. So that's pretty good, because you're probably playing a land every turn, so you're proliferating every turn, which then also gives all your planeswalkers additional counters. So I don't know, but that seems like a pretty good deal to me. And if you're, I mean, since most of our Planeswalker decks, Super Friends decks, are going to be running green, you may have doubling season out. So, you know, proliferate, double the proliferate. Yeah, pretty good. Put it in a track so that, you know, almost get like 4 counters on a Planeswalker every turn. That's just like best case scenario, but like that's just like an example of how nutty some of these can get.
Yeah, especially if you're playing green and you have a bunch of like extra lands per turn. And yeah, I'm talking about Magical Christmas Land now, but like it's totally possible. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like with the fetch lands.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're gonna now talk about Spark Double. It is 3 and a blue for a creature illusion. It's a 0/0, but wait, there's more. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker you control, except it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. If it's a creature, it enters with an additional loyalty counter on it. If it's a planeswalker and it is not a legendary permanent. So like the legend rule doesn't apply and you don't have to like sacrifice it. So basically what people do is they basically make this a copy of their Planeswalker. And if it's like your commander, you basically, congratulations, have another Planeswalker commander on the battlefield.
Yeah,
it's like, which one do I kill? And I'm like, kill the original Planes. It's so annoying. God.
Arena Rector. Sorry. 3 and a white, creature, human, cleric, 1/2. When Arena Rector dies, you may exile it. If you do, search your library for a Planeswalker card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So, Academy Rector, was that the original one for the enchantments?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is paying homage to that, where you kill this, or you sack it, and then you could just tutor out a Planeswalker, which, I mean, I don't know. That seems pretty good value to me.
Yeah, I remember when this first came out in like Battle Bond, and it like the price of this card was just like outrageous. People were like, "Oh my god!" And it was like, "Oh, it was so expensive." It's still a good card, but like, oh my god, people like really overpriced this thing.
It's fairly affordable now, especially because they got that Judge promo reprint.
It does look nice. Ooh, okay, I'm excited for this next card. This is our last card. We're going to talk about, obviously there are more cards that synergize with Super Friends decks, but like we can't have this episode be 10 hours long because we got other things to do. So our last card is going to be Oath of Teferi. It is a legendary enchantment. It says when it enters the battlefield, exile another target permanent you control. Exile it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you kind of like flicker it. And you may activate the loyalty abilities of planeswalkers you control twice each turn rather than only once. So it's kind of like doubling your value in a way, like additionally, not multiplicative, but it is still you're activating your planeswalkers twice. You can go up and then down, or down and then up, whichever you want, or up and up, or down or down. You have options. It's pretty good.
Yeah. And so a lot of the cards that we just mentioned were, I guess Teferi is white, blue, Arena Rector is white, Spark Double's blue, green, Evolution Sage green, Chain Veil Artifact, so it could be in any deck. Doubling Season is also green, but Jesse, out of curiosity, but like, how do you feel not being able to run some of these essential cards? Because we were talking about earlier how white is kind of a support color for planeswalkers, but obviously Nicol Bolas doesn't have access to that. So do you feel that sometimes puts the deck at a disadvantage, or not really?
I don't know. I'm more of the type of person that likes kind of the deck building restraints, but I don't have like easy access to like super powerful cards. So now I have to think like, okay, I can't go that avenue, but what other options do I have? And it's like, in these colors, I have like really good artifact synergy, I have discard, I have land destruction, there are a lot of other options. And the only issue I have with like Planeswalker synergy is that they don't really win you the game but like taking cards out of people's hands are probably going to win you the game. Go ahead.
So it's like your style of Super Friends is like, I'm going to control everyone where nobody has like lands or hands or a board state, and I'm just gonna like use that time to like generate value and win. Whereas other sort of Super Friends versions kind of are like, I'm just gonna generate a whole bunch of counters and proliferates and just like absolutely go hog wild, maybe ultimate a few things, make some emblems, and like kind of stacks you out in some ways, but like you can still have your stuff. I'm just gonna like hard lock you down and just like win. So there's definitely ways to like play Super Friends. There's still some variation in that.
To me, traditional Super Friends feels almost more like combo, in the sense that like I have my doubling season. Or you could compare. You could like prepare, right? What is Tamio? Like 5 mana, doubling season is 5 mana. So you have like, you build up your way till you have like 10 mana, people are tapped or whatever. And now you're like, okay, I have my combo, here's my doubling season, here's my Tamio, here's my ult, and like, this is my win. I don't have traditional ways like that. I have to figure out ways of like, it's essentially a control deck for like what it's worth, and I have to figure out how to control 3 other people by not relying on combo now. I have to like just kind of accrue value or deny other people resources. So it's, yeah, they're definitely like really different styles of playing, and it's kind of just like what you want to do. I didn't want to go the combo route. It's weird to say, but I like the interaction, even though I'm literally like taking away people's cards and like
being sorcery speed,
destroy their lands. But I like to, I don't know, feel like challenged. Like it's so weird to explain, because there is challenge in doing combo, but to me it's like I like to make the game sometimes 3v1, and I want people.
You like being arch enemy.
I want them to be. I like beating 3 people at once when they know what I'm gonna do to them. It makes me feel good that it's like, that's the type of player I guess I've turned out to be. I didn't think it would end up like this, but
you live long enough, you become the villain.
Exactly.
All right, so this is a good transition to strengths, but before we do that, there's a few other like cards that are like in the 99 of Super Friends decks. There's Oath of Nissa, Oath of Gideon, Oath of Ajani. Those are like the only good oaths. There's Humility, there's Crawl Space, Contagion Engine, Contagion Clasp, Deep Glow Skate. We've already mentioned Tamio Field Researcher, Silent Arbiter, and we could probably talk for another like 30 minutes about other cards, but we don't have time for that. So I would like to now move into the strengths and weaknesses of Super Friends, because we've kind of been tiptoeing and like lightly teasing around this, but I now want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of playing a Super Friends deck, because every deck is not perfect, believe it or not. Every deck is not unbeatable, believe it or not. So let's talk about it. What are the strengths of being a Super Friends deck? I'll start. One of the strengths is being a very resilient permanent. Some of the most resilient, because not all permanents are equally as resilient. Lands are very resilient, enchantments are very resilient, and so are planeswalkers. Most removal does not affect planeswalkers. Most removal is very good at dealing with artifacts, enchantments, creatures, but that's about it, unless you start like teching in. Well, that's kind of, I'm not sure that's the best words to use it, but you guys understand what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm. You either need to, I know that some of the older cards were eroded to allow you to be able to interact with planeswalkers a little more. Like, I think when they say player, they can say either opponent or planeswalker, or it might have been situational.
Yeah, so a good example would be Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt has been eroded to any target, so you can do player or creature or planeswalker, I believe.
Right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, black is the color who can, I think, directly deal with not enchantments, planeswalkers, just because it's able to kill creatures, so it kind of makes the most sense.
Yeah, and that's been a recent change. That's been a recent change where black has been given the ability to directly deal with planeswalkers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say planeswalkers have benefited from being introduced as a mechanic the latest than any other permanent type, because now there are so many older cards that you can run in a planeswalker deck that would normally like just ruin a normal deck, and you just completely get all the benefits. Like mass land destruction in red only targets like creatures, artifacts, lands, and it's like there's one permanent type. There's a couple permanent types that doesn't target, and planeswalkers is one of them. And there's a ton of cards like that, so they really benefit from being introduced last.
So on that note, it's funny because planeswalkers came out in like Lorwyn, which was like 2007. So at the time of recording, that's like 13 years. And Magic the Gathering's been out for like 25. So like, and a mechanic that's like 13 years old is still like in terms of a new permanent type being added to the game, that's still relatively new. And that just kind of makes me laugh.
It's the newest card type, I believe. I mean, I don't think they've introduced another card type since, other than maybe Tribal. I don't know if Tribal was before or after Planeswalkers, but they don't really support that anymore.
All right, we should get back on track.
Yeah, so mass board wipes do not affect your board as often. So in Planeswalker decks, you are probably running Wrath of God or Damnation to get rid of creatures that are on the battlefield, but your Planeswalkers will stay safe. And it also gives your opponents less, creatures to interact with, like interact with your planeswalkers.
Yeah, they can't attack into your planeswalkers if you just like nuke the board every single turn.
Mm-hmm.
Which I know casuals have been very salty about, but it's like that's what you got to do sometimes. Like white, especially white, has a whole bunch of wraths, so many wraths. And then, as we've kind of alluded to earlier, emblems are basically unstoppable, and you can lock down your opponents with them. You can use Narset Transcendence Ultimate, so they can only cast non-creature spells, which will shut down most decks. And then you can also play Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, do his ultimate, and just make it so their first spell of every turn is countered or whatever. So that's really rough. And then you can also just do Dovin Bond's ultimate, and just you kind of see where I'm going, where you just like keep locking your opponents out of the game from casting anything, and you just like keep developing and grinding value out of your planeswalkers. Fun, quick story, side note. I had someone play a Superfriends deck, and they ultimated Jace, Unraveler of Secrets, to where the first spell on your turn or something is countered, and I got around it by having my first spell of the turn be Dragonlord Dramoka, which says it can't be countered at all. So I'm just he's countered, and I'm like, nah, bitch, read this card. And he's like, oh, and then I'm like, yeah, now the rest of my spells basically can't be interacted with. Here I go. And then I was playing Sigarda, which plays a bunch of O-Ring effects, which is actually one of the best ways to deal with the Planeswalker deck. So here I was in a game of Commander, and like the rest of my opponents were like shut out of the game because the emblem got out, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is like 1v1 now. So like I had to like O-ring all of his Planeswalkers and just like start attacking him because the rest of my players were like locked out. I'm just like, oh, I have to just carry this team, and we're not even on a team. But like for the sake of making this, for the sake of me winning too, I just need to kill him.
You should thank him. He basically won you the game.
It was so convoluted.
I would be like, always play this deck versus me, because I'll always win.
I still had to play around it. I still had to think really hard, but it was just like, oh my god. All right, we should move on.
Yeah. So strengths. What are some of the weaknesses?
Well, there's still one more cool strength to it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't think I wrote this, dude.
I did, because I'll talk about it, because I think it's cool. Like, I think it's, like, Planeswalker has a really cool, unique win con, which is, like, the Vraska Planeswalkers, which just make these creatures that just say, hey, if they hit you, you pretty much fucking die. And, like, that's a really good way to end the game, right? Like, you just nuke everybody's creatures into oblivion every single turn, and then one turn you're like, alright, I make this small, insignificant creature. Oh, by the way, if it hits you, you die. So next turn I swing and kill you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Phage. Right?
Yeah, it's basically like a Phage on a small creature, but it's not as convoluted as Phage.
But have you ever exiled all but one of someone's library? That when you win that way, that one feels too good. That's why you should play Nicol Bolas, everyone. Everyone switch your Planeswalker decks to Nicol Bolas.
I haven't done that, but I have exiled all of my opponent's libraries simultaneously and then pass turn. So
that's good too.
Yeah. So now we can talk about the weaknesses.
Yeah, I think something too is kind of going into a weakness maybe, but I think Jesse's point brings up an interesting one where, he says, like, exile all cards from a library except one. That reminds me of the Jace the Mind Sculptor ultimate, who is like the boogeyman of other formats, but not so much in our format. So
I really do not care, yeah.
Yeah, Planeswalkers just can be so diverse in, like, where they're a threat, too, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, Jace the Mind Sculptor, as much as I love him, just because I think it's such an iconic card, like, even before playing Magic, even before playing Magic, I knew about him, and he was the first Planeswalker with a 4 ability. But yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, some Planeswalkers just thrive better in other formats. Nicol Bolas, I think, is kind of the Nicol Bolas the Arisen is a good example of how he's better for EDH because he's more likely to get off that ultimate rather than Jace, who starts off so low.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Nicol Bolas saw playing standard, but go off.
Whatever. So the weaknesses, more weaknesses. It is a slower.
But there are no weaknesses to Superfriend guy. Superfriend is unbeatable. I'm in my casual pod, and I can't beat them. Like, they're just impossible to deal with. You should ban all Planeswalkers.
Hard agree.
Yeah, you're right. Hard agree. Let's just end the podcast here. Planeswalkers are banned starting now.
No.
Alright, it is a slower deck archetype because they tend to be more mana intensive spells.
Yeah, average CMC of like 5 or 6. Unless you have a Planeswalker that are also creating tokens, there aren't many ways for you to protect them without Pillow Fort cards or Wrath effects. And also, we haven't actually talked about this yet, but this is really true. Like, you can't really build a Super Friends deck without shilling out a whole bunch of money. Because Super Friends, each Planeswalker is always at least a couple bucks, which adds up when you're building a 100-card deck. Especially if you want those full art, borderless, foiled cards. I don't remember what set they're from, Mythic Edition or whatever.
Mythic Edition, and then now they're doing it in all the collector boosters. We'll include Jesse's deck list. He was kind enough to, share that with us. But you'll see, the deck's not it's not. I mean, I think you could build maybe a budget Super Friends deck, but typically, since they're kind of the chase cards of all the sets, they tend to be worth the most money.
Oh yeah.
This next one's kind of like a counterpoint to what we just said with the strengths, and even though you have access to all these rafts, but it does make the casuals a little salty if you're just nuking the board every turn to try and protect your Planeswalkers. But
yeah,
what are you gonna do?
How do you deal with control? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Control is unbeatable. It's like an OP archetype.
Hard to
No. Then we have. Oh yeah. Then there's also just like, and I'll be kind of a devil's advocate on this next point, which is a weakness of the deck is that casuals will complain to themselves that you're making the game too long for playing a Planeswalker as your commander, because a critique of having Planeswalkers as commanders is that like people have to spend their creatures attacking into the Planeswalker instead of attacking you, the player, and your life total. Especially like when you can recast your Planeswalker and they have to continue to attack into them. And like, to some degree, I understand. And I also, to some degree, understand that, especially after listening to Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work podcast, that like the game, it's better to have a game that ends quicker than you wanted it to, than to have a game that goes on far longer than you want it to. So I do have some concessions. That being said, I do still think people complain far too much about, to themselves at least mentally, like, oh, you're making the game go longer. Like, nah, you're fine.
Just win faster, dude. Like, I don't see the problem.
Yeah, just
turn up their lands. How are they gonna play their 5-mana walkers?
Yes, that's the solution. Oh, that's the solution. Just MLD, play mass land destruction. Just blow up their lands and just like
tax them up, dude.
It's like sometimes you just ask them, do you concede? Yeah. So.
Alright. The last thing that I think we're going to get into is just Planeswalkers as commanders. So they are a legendary permanent type, and they're not creatures, but they are kind of like creatures in a way, where a lot of people have kind of wanted the rules committee to allow them to become like your commander. So they have hard stated that Planeswalkers will not be your commanders. So that's why other formats exist, like Oathbreaker or Brawl. But there are a few exceptions. So we had the first round of commanders who could be your Planeswalkers from the Commander 2014 product. We had one in each color, monocolor: Daretti, Teferi, Nahiri, Obnixilis, and Freyalise. 4 years later, we got Aminatou, Estrid, Lord Windgrace, and Saheeli. And then in Battle Bond, we got Rowan and Will Kenrith, who could be partnered together as your commanders, or they could be just their own deck in general, but typically they tend to be built together. And then we have a set of foot Planeswalkers. So Jesse's example of Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. We have Jace, Friend's Prodigy, Liliana, the Heretical Healer, Chandra, forget her name, Gideon, and Nissa. So the original Gatewatch, and kind of they start out as legendary creatures who can then like spark to become their Planeswalkers.
Chandra, Fire of Kaladesh.
Yes. The Gideon doesn't even call himself Gideon before he becomes Gideon. He's something else. Oh gosh, what is he? Kithian, Hero of Akros.
Next time, just ask me.
Sorry. Do you know what the Nissa one's called? Yeah, so green is Nissa Vastwood Seer. Okay. So just kind of let's wrap up the conversation, but maybe spend each 2 minutes on this subject. But do you think the rules committee should ever change it, where all Planeswalkers should be your commander?
Yes.
Or
yes,
keep it as is?
I think they should change it. Yes.
So Jesse's a yes. Blake, what are you?
Hard yes.
I'm indifferent. I've kind of made my peace that they've said no and that they're never going to change their mind because they're set in their ways and there's nothing we can do to change their minds no matter how much we ask.
Okay. I mean, I agree with you. I would like them to change the rule. I'm with Jesse, but I do think what you're saying, Blake, is probably a realistic way of looking at it. I think no matter how much we ask at this point,
because it's not a big enough issue for them to care.
Right. And You know, they go into the argument of like, oh, that's just like what, maybe like 100 new possible legendary commanders. Who knows what kind of problems that'll
They already got problems. They already have problems.
That's a great point, Jesse. Thank you. Yes.
Like, when are they gonna fix that stupid ass Flash Hulk, like, Oracle nonsense? All that nonsense. Like, they have problems. They got huge problems. They just don't care. So it's like, why do you care about, like, Planeswalkers then? You might as well. Yeah, I want to play my nice Nahiri. I want to play my nice Mythic Edition Nahiri.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me play my Mythic Edition Nahiri. What the hell?
Okay. It's okay. Just do Rule 0.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure.
Just go to your
People
LGS and
will be
save Rule 0, and you can just do anything, right?
I can't even get my own play group to agree to that. I need them to force it.
I would totally be okay with it, Jesse.
Okay, you got one. You got 2 out of 4 or 5.
We'll
yeah.
play 1v1 Commander.
That's different. That's a whole nother can of worms. All right, we should just end it.
All right. Well, thank you, Jesse, for coming on to the podcast tonight. Your vast amount of knowledge for Superfriends was very extensive, vast knowledge was very insightful to the subject. I hope everyone was able to learn a lot more than just from me and Blake.
The more you know.
The more you know. I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone's in quarantine right now and are practicing social distancing. We hope that you're healthy and, you know, hopefully this will pass and we will all get through this.
And we can all be nerds, socially awkward together at a card shop.
Yep. Expect some big things to come in the next couple weeks with the Ikoria and all the new Commander stuff coming your way. Stay tuned. We have some exciting plans to do for that. And yeah, alright. So if you want to check us out or share us, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can find your podcast. We are on Twitter at TheWizardStaff101. Find us on Facebook or Instagram, and you can send us an email at thewizardstaff101@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening. We hope you have a great night, and we'll see you again soon. Peace.
Peace.